when you've used your template to make an envelope, if you use scrap paper like I do, they tend to be very, very flimsy. So what I always do is I collage on them, and I usually decorate them in some way which thickens them up and makes them firmer, like this one that I've done earlier. So this one started off life as a piece of scrap paper. I've used some transfers from little printouts, some patterned paper with prints on it, and some acrylic paint just to decorate it. On the other side, another transfer, some acrylic paint again, and some patterned paper. There's just a stamp on there. This evening I'm going to use this envelope that I've made, cut out from the template, and I'm going to put some transfers on it, so 2 transfers, and also I'm going to collage some pattern with some stamps on it. Now earlier on I had covered these transfers, which were just normal printouts from my inkjet printer, with some matte medium. These have had about 5 coats of matte medium on them. Each coat's been left to dry in between, so the paper is quite flexible, but it is quite thick as well. Some of our American friends use Mod Podge, but we don't tend to get Mod Podge easily over here in England. We tend to use PVA, white PVA glue, instead of Mod Podge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just position these where I want them to make sure that they're going to fit on. So I'm going to put 1 transfer here on the front, leaving plenty of room for the address, and then I am going to put another transfer on the back here, making sure that the flap isn't going to cover the transfer. So originally I was going to put this big one on, but it's just a little bit too large. The flap is going to cover the top of it, and when I put tape on, it's going to rip the top of this when the person who receives it opens the envelope. The idea of doing these fancy envelopes is so that people can use them in their own art, and they can actually make use of what you've made. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on the back here, like this as a transfer. So once again, the Mod Podge or matte medium, whichever you want to use. I've found through experience that if you put the matte medium onto the brush like this, not directly onto the picture, it doesn't tend to run when it's an inkjet print. But if you put it on too thick, or if you drip it onto the picture, it tends to make the picture go blurred. So very, very thin layer like that, put it to one side to dry, and the last layer on this one as well. So once I've done that, and these are going to the side to dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare my page for the transfer. So nice and even on, and put it to one side to dry. Now my background, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some acrylic paint, and I'm going to scrape it onto the background just to give some colour. The transfers will go on then, and we will rub the back off so that the paper's removed, and then I will put a different colour around the edges so that the transfers stand out because they're the paler colour. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten out my envelope. This was made out of 2 pieces of A4, which were just scrap paper. And what I've done is I've collaged strips of book page onto here just to make it a bit tougher. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get some of the white acrylic paint, just cheap acrylic paint, squeeze that out onto my page, and this one on my background I'm going to have yellow as well. Not too much of the yellow because I just want it to be a pale peach colour or a pale cream colour. Little bit of matte medium in with the paint, because what that does is it helps it to move on the page, but it doesn't water it down like water would do. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mix it up on the page and then scrape it across with my card, just so that it gives a nice colour covering. I haven't mixed the colours up too much because I want a little bit of a marbled effect there. And once I've done that, I don't need it to go right the way to the edge of the flaps because the flaps are going to be tucked under in the envelope. So once I've done that, I need to let that dry, and then we will be ready to put our transfers on. Now, one of the things before you attempt to put your transfers on, you need to make sure that you can't put your transfers on like this way round. You must envisage that the envelope is going to be folded. I'm saying this because I have in the past put the pictures on and then realised I've got one upside down, or I've put it too near the flap and the flap's actually covered the picture on the back of the envelope. So I'm going to leave that to dry. Just check my transfers, they're drying nicely, and then we'll come back and we'll put the transfers onto the envelope. Okay, my envelope's dry, my 2 pictures are dry. These are how I'm going to put them on. So this one's going to be on here on the back, and this one's going to be here at the front of the envelope. Because I'm quite ditzy, I have folded the envelope up just to make sure that they're on the right side, and to make sure that they're going to be in the right place, like that, and then like that. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to put another layer of matte medium on both of them. Remember, the matte medium needs to be in an even layer on the picture, but only on the front. No matte medium can go on the back of the picture. So what I tend to do is I put one last even layer on each of the pictures. Now, it's got to be quite a thin layer, right the way to all the edges on both pictures. These pictures have already had about 6 coatings of matte medium on already, so they've had lots and lots of thin layers. What I've found is that if you put lots and lots of thin layers on, it works a lot better than one thick layer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put matte medium on my page where I want the transfer to be. It's really important to make sure that the matte medium covers every bit of the page that you're going to put the picture on. And what I normally do is I brush it one way and then brush it the other, just to make sure that you've got a really good coating where the picture's going to go. Then you put the picture down, the picture onto the envelope. Press it down nice and firm. Once again, making sure that none of the matte medium goes onto the back of your paper, because when you come to pull this paper off, it will be extremely difficult to take it off if you've got any matte medium on the back. So that now is really nice and smooth and flat on, and that needs leaving now to dry. The next one, so this one is going to go on this side here, and once again I'm going to make sure that the page is completely covered with the matte medium. Over time, what I've found is that if the picture is just tacky with the medium and the page is nice and damp with the medium, the transfers tend to work well. So just making sure that that page has got a really good covering on it. And then once again I'm going to put the picture down face down on here. I'm putting it to this side of the envelope, which will leave enough space to put the address on, but also stamps as well. And what I tend to do is I try to put stamps on the envelopes because I always think that they look nicer. And when my hubby goes to the post office, they actually know now that he does want stamps, and they never sort of try to put labels on. I know that in the group that I'm in, we have had discussions that labels do get to if your envelope has a label on it, it does get to the destination quicker. But I just tend to like stamps because I like to get stamps and I like to collect them and use them in my art. So they're nice and straight and flat, so we're going to leave those until they're dry, and that way I found that that gives the best results if you leave them until they're dry. So in the meantime, what I've done is I've stamped just some random images on a pattern. And what I'm going to do is, once these transfers are dry and I've rubbed the back off them, I'm going to collage over the top with these pattern pieces. So our transfers are nice and dry now. While I was actually waiting for these to dry, I did do 2 other sheets, 2 other envelopes with transfers on, because I thought to myself that if this one doesn't work, I've got 2 others to have a go at, because transfers, they are quite hit and miss, and I never know whether or not they're going to work or not. So what I've found through experience is a small amount of water works best. So when I first started doing this, I used to soak the back with water, but now I've found that just a small spray like that is plenty. And then patience, just wait for it to soak in. Which patience is something that I don't have much of, but what you need to do is just wait for the damp to soak right the way through the paper. Once again, this spray is not too good, but you just want all the back of the paper wet, but you don't want it absolutely soaking. And then, once again, patience, you just need to wait for a while for the water to penetrate through the paper. If you look where it's gone dark, it's penetrated through the paper. Where it's still light, there's the bits that aren't wet. Right, now, once again through experience, what I've found is the bits that are light are the bits that will most likely stay on your transfer. So they just need a little bit more water on them, just to make sure that it's soaked right the way through. Like I say, it's a bit of a waiting game, is this, because what you want is you want all the paper on the back to be wet, and you don't want to be too enthusiastic when you rub your transfer, because you don't want to rub your actual transfer off your paper. The only thing that you're wanting to do is take that paper off, and if you look now, it's getting to the point where it's quite easy to peel it off. And sometimes what you find is, depending on the paper, I've found that sometimes it peels off really, really easily. Other times you'll find that the transfer actually peels with the paper. So I think it's very hit and miss. So it's not an exact science. Sometimes I've found that the paper just slides off more or less in one big sheet, and I don't know if that depends on the paper or the thickness that you've put the matte medium on. So if you look now, you can see that the transfer is very clear. One of the things that you do need to do is make sure that you get all the paper rubbed off, because if you leave paper on, if you look and you can see here, if you leave any paper on the back, when the transfer dries, what happens is you get like a cloudy layer over the top of your transfer. So all that I'm going to do is I'm going to rub all of this off. Now, you can rub quite vigorously, and you don't tend to tear the transfer underneath, because with you keeping that layer of matte medium nice and tacky, it sticks together onto the page and it holds the transfer onto the page. I remember a lot of years ago someone showing me how to do these sort of transfers with the yacht varnish and a magazine picture. So what they did was they covered a magazine picture with 6 or 7 layers of yacht varnish, let it dry, and then soaked it in a saucer of water and peeled the paper off the back to leave a transfer that you could put on a window. Now obviously with the yacht varnish you have to wait for hours and hours between coats for it to dry, but with the matte medium it's quite quick. You can actually coat a transfer and cover it in a couple of hours. So if you can see that now, I've more or less got all the paper off that transfer. What I will do is I will leave that to dry and then go back over again just to make sure that I've got every piece of paper off, because once you've finished, and what I tend to do is I cover it in white glue and then stick the pattern paper over. Once you cover it in white glue, you obviously can't get any of the paper off, and it does leave quite a cloudy picture. You can just see there a bit of cloud on it. So let's leave that for a bit. We don't want to rub too much because we don't want to actually start and rub the transfer away, but we do want to rub every bit of paper off. So we've got that. One thing about transfers that you've got to remember is they become transposed. So the only writing that you can transfer is writing that's backwards. So that's one thing that you've got to remember. You can't print out any lettering unless the lettering is actually backwards, because you will end up with a mirror image of the text. So this one's not coming off quite as easy as that one. Just give it a bit more of a spray maybe, but feels a little bit more difficult. One of the things when you're rubbing is remember that the edges are quite delicate. So what I tend to do is I try to rub sort of along the edges. If you rub inwards like that, sometimes you catch the edge and you peel the edge up, just like I've done here, like I was saying, try not to do. So you end up with a little bit like that. Not something that I get too worried about because it all adds to the overall look. And to be honest with you, once you put other pieces of pattern paper over, it actually doesn't look too bad. Right. So this is nearly done. Just watch these top corners, because once again we don't want to rub like I have done here. What I could have said was that I did it on purpose just to show you how it did it, couldn't I? But once again, I'm not too worried about it, because once we put the pattern papers on, you won't really notice that edge bit. So if you look at the two now, can you see that this one's quite clear other than a few little patches? This one's still quite cloudy in places. So it's just a matter of rubbing that paper off, those last few pieces of paper off, and then leaving it to dry, because sometimes it does look a little bit cloudy because of the matte medium, because when the matte medium gets wet it goes sort of a milky colour. Don't know if you can see on the video, but you can see there's some writing there that's actually being transposed. The person that took the photograph, most likely. So I think we're just about finished on this one. We just need to give them both a final rub down, and then they'll be done. And then from here on in, you can decorate the envelope however you really want. You can put another colour paint on round here, like I did with the last one, or you can leave it so that it is as it is. And we just need to get all the rest of this paper off here. Once all the paper's off, we will have ourselves quite a nice transferred image envelope ready for the next stage. As I said earlier, making transfers is quite often a hit and miss process. So you can see here where I've just peeled a little bit of the transfer off, but this one's come out fairly well. This one as well, I'm quite proud of this. What you've got to make sure is you get every little piece of that backing paper off, or else it will go cloudy when it dries. So you've got to keep rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. As with all the transfers, I have done the others, and you get a mixed sort of result with them. So this one looks okay, a little bit of tearing around the edges, but that's probably my impatience. Other than that, the transfer is fairly a nice clean transfer. This one my impatience again has peeled a few little bits off the edges, but I'm not too bothered about that because I am going to put some pattern paper over. This one was more or less a total disaster. I managed to peel it here, and it's not a very good clear transfer. This one on the other hand isn't too bad. It did have a pinkish tinge to it, did this, and on the pink background it does look quite nice, the girl with the doll. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put another scraping of paint on these sides here, just to put a bit of contrast in, and then I'm going to stick the paper on. We'll do this one because this is the one that we started with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of blue on, and I'm also going to mix that in with quite a bit of cream because I don't want a really bright blue. I just want the colour to sort of show, but not too bright, not to overpower the rest of the paint. So I'm just going to scrape this on, avoiding my transfers, so that I still have some of the yellow showing through, but I do have some of the blue and cream over the top of it. And once again, just scraping that on, not in any sort of pattern, just making sure that I don't put it onto those transfers, but it gets a covering just over the yellow to tone the yellow down a little bit and just make it a little bit more interesting. So doing this, not too bothered about this bit here because that's going to be on the fold. And I'm just colouring this in here. To use a bit of baby wipe just to wipe that off because I don't really want it on my transfer. So now that I've done that, I'm going to think about my pattern pieces. So what I've done is I've stamped some girls and some flowers on this. So I'm just going to think about where these are going to be put, because I don't really want flowers to cover up my transfer, but I would like the girl on this. Maybe another piece, let's have a look. So the girl will go at this side here. This won't cover up the transfer too much, and that will go over like that. Just make sure that it's positioned where I want it to be. And then, yeah, definitely there. So what I'm going to do is this is more or less dry, but I'm not overly bothered about whether it's going to be totally dry or not. I'm going to use a bit of matte medium this time and just spread it over here and put the transfer down. What I will do later on is cut round the transfer, but at the moment I just want to get it down onto the top of the page how I want it. So I want her to stand like that. The creases in the pattern paper give it a bit of interest. And once again, I'm just going to trim this off when it's dry. Let's get this pushed down nice and close over there. This will dry more or less clear, but it will leave the stamps with a nice contrast to the background. Once again, I'll just trim this off when this is dry. There we go. I think I'm going to leave the front for now, because there is going to be a label on here, isn't there? So I'll need a label and a stamp, unless, let's have a look, maybe not. Maybe what we'll do is we'll tear this piece off here and we'll just put a strip across here with a few flowers on it, and then what will happen then is the address label will go over it anyway, just to add a little bit of interest on that front. I'll put some matte medium down. I think what we'll do is we'll have it there just with, it doesn't really matter that there's some paint on it, and just cover that up. Let's wipe the paint off my brush. Just going to use a baby wipe, wipe that paint off the transfer there. And there we have it. Oh, a rather bizarre envelope. So these are completed envelopes, ready to go out in Happy Mail. Thanks for watching.